next presenter, Dr. Grieger, and so we are welcome into the hall and please take your seats.
Hear me okay?
Welcome, Mr. Grieger, to Lithuania.
Thank you.
So everybody is waiting for you, so the stage is yours.
Why, thank you. All right, before I begin, if I could direct everyone's attention to a website. You can whip out your phones, your laptop, or just look at it up here on the screen. We're going to healthdata.org/Lithuania. That's the healthdata.org is the website of the Global Burden of Disease Study. It's the largest study on disease risk factors in human history, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And if you go there and you scroll down, you can see that the number one cause of death and disability in Lithuania is a leading cause is the Lithuanian diet. So number one killer, high blood pressure. Number two, diet, and only then followed by tobacco. And the reason why diet, the Lithuanian diet, is such a leading killer is because the number one killer disease in Lithuania is ischemic heart disease. And so that's what I'd like to start today with the number one killer of Lithuanians. Of course, you can type in any country here and find the leading causes of death. So let me switch over and start there. And is that screen showing up okay for everyone?
Yes.
All right. And still, I'm trying to share my whole screen. Is that working?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Allow me to begin on a personal note. It's a picture of me taken around the time that my grandmother was diagnosed with end-stage heart disease and sent home to die. She already had so many bypass surgeries and basically run out of plumbing at some point. And finally, we got to her crushing chest pain. Her life was over at age 65. I heard about this guy Nathan Pritikin, one of our leading lifestyle medicine pioneers. My grandma's actually featured in Pritikin's biography. My grandma was one of the death's door people. Frances Greger, my grandmother, arrived at one of his early sessions in a wheelchair. Mrs. Greger had angina, heart disease, claudication. Her condition so bad, she could no longer walk without great pain in her chest and legs. Within 3 weeks, though, she's not only out of her wheelchair, she was walking 10 miles a day. Here's a picture of my grandma at her grandson's wedding 15 years after doctors had abandoned her to die. She was given a medical death sentence at age 65, but thanks to a healthy diet, was able to enjoy another 31 years on this planet till age 96 to continue to enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. That's why I went into medicine. Now, years later, when Dr. Dean Ornish published his landmark lifestyle heart trial proving with something called quantitative angiography that indeed heart disease could be reversed, arteries open up without drugs, without surgery, just a plant-based diet and lifestyle program, I assumed this is going to be the game changer. I mean, my family had seen it with their own eyes, but here it was, in black and white, published in some of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, yet nothing happened. So wait a second, I'm effectively the cure to our number one killer, the number one killer in Lithuania. What else might there be in the medical literature? If this can get kind of lost down some rabbit hole, what else is there in the medical literature that can help my patients, but just didn't have a corporate budget driving its promotion? Well, I made it my life's mission to find out. For those who aren't familiar with my work, every year I read through every issue of every English language nutrition journal in the world, so busy folks like you don't have to. They can follow the most interesting, most groundbreaking, most practical findings to new videos and articles I upload every day to my nonprofit site, nutritionfacts.org. Everything on the website is free. There are no ads, no corporate sponsorships, particularly non-commercial, not selling anything, just put it up as a public service, as a labor of love, as a tribute to my grandma. New videos and articles every day on the latest in evidence-based nutrition. What a concept. So where did Predikin get his evidence from? Well, a network of missionary hospitals set up throughout sub-Saharan Africa uncovered what may be one of the most important advances in health, according to one of our most preeminent figures of the 20th century in medicine, Dr. Dennis Burkitt, the fact that many of our major and commonest diseases were universally rare, like heart disease. The African population of Uganda, for example, coronary artery disease was almost non-existent. So wait a second. Number one killer, almost non-existent. What were they eating? Well, they were eating lots of vegetables, grains, and greens, and their protein almost entirely from plant sources. And they had the cholesterol levels to prove it, very similar to what one sees in kind of modern day plant eaters. You say, wait a second, maybe they were just dying early from something else, never lived long enough to get heart disease. No. Age matched heart attack rates in Uganda versus St. Louis. Out of 632 autopsies in Uganda, only one myocardial infarction. Out of 632 age and gender matched autopsies here in Missouri in the States, 136 myocardial infarctions, more than 100 times the rate of our leading killer. In fact, they're so blown away, went back, did another 800 autopsies in Uganda, still, that one small healed infarct, meaning it wasn't even the cause of death, out of 1,427 patients, less than 1 in 1,000, whereas here in Lithuania, it's an epidemic. Atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, is a disease that begins in childhood. Here in the States, all children raised on the standard American diet already have fatty streaks, the first stage of the disease, building up their arteries by age 10. These plaques can then turn, these streaks can then turn to plaques in their 20s, get worse in their 30s, and then start killing us all. Heart causes a heart attack in our brain, the same disease process can cause a stroke. So if there's anyone there today watching this older than age 10, then the question is not whether or not to start eating healthy to prevent heart disease. It's whether or not you want to reverse the heart disease you likely already have, whether you know it or not. Is that even possible? You know, when researchers took people with heart disease, put them on the kind of plant-based diet, that do not get epidemic heart disease, their hope was maybe we could slow the disease down a little bit, maybe even stop it. But instead, something miraculous happened. As soon as people stopped eating artery-clogging diets, their bodies were able to start dissolving some of that plaque away, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery, suggesting that bodies wanted to be healthy all along, but were just never given the chance. On the left there, that improvement in blood flow to the heart muscle itself was after just 3 weeks of plant-based nutrition, showing it's not only improving the structure, but the function of the arteries as well. Let me share with you what's been called the best kept secret in all of medicine. The best kept secret in medicine is that sometimes, under the right conditions, the body can actually heal itself. You know, if you whack your shin really hard on a coffee table or something, and you get all red, hot, painful, swollen, inflamed, well, he'll naturally just stand back and let your body work its magic. But, it's like, what if you kept whacking your shin in the same place day after day? In fact, 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You'd never heal. You go to your physician and say, my shin hurts. And they, no problem, whip out their prescription pad, write you a prescription for painkillers. You still whacking your shin 3 times a day, still really hurts like heck, but it feels so much better with those pain pills on board. Thank heavens for modern medicine. It's like when our patients take nitroglycerin for crushing chest pain. Tremendous relief, but not doing anything to treat the underlying cause of the disease. Our body wants to come back to health if we let it. If we keep re-damaging ourselves 3 times a day, we may never heal. It's like smoking. One of the most amazing things I learned in all my medical training was that within about 15 years of stopping smoking, your lung cancer risk approaches that of a lifelong non-smoker. Isn't that amazing? Your lungs can clear out all that tar, and eventually it's almost as if you never started smoking at all. And every morning of our smoking life, that healing process starts until, wham, first cigarette of the day. Re-injuring our lungs with every puff, just like we can re-injure our arteries with every bite, when all we had to do all along, the miracle cure is to just stand back, get out of the way, stop re-injuring ourselves, and let our body's natural healing processes bring us back towards health. The human body is a self-healing machine. Sure, you can choose moderation, hit yourself with a smaller hammer, but why beat yourself up at all? This is nothing new. This is American Heart Journal 1977. Cases like Mr. F.W. here, heart disease so bad couldn't even make it to the mailbox. Started eating healthier. A few months later, he was climbing mountains, no pain. Right? Well, there certainly are these new classes of anti-angina drugs on the market now. It costs thousands of dollars a year, at least here in the States. But hey, at least at the highest dose, may be able to extend exercise duration as long as 33.5 seconds. It does not look as though those going the drug route are going to be climbing mountains anytime soon. See, plant-based diets aren't just safer and cheaper, they can work better because you're treating the underlying cause of the disease. Now at this point, normally I move on to cancer, talk about the role that diet may play in preventing, arresting, and reversing each of the top 15 killers, at least here in the States. But in a certain sense, what more do we need to know? There's only one diet ever been proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients, a plant-based diet. So anytime someone tries to sell you on some new diet, do me a favor, ask them a simple question. Wait a second, has this diet been proven to reverse heart disease? The number one reason my loved ones will die? If the answer is no, why would you even consider it? If that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the number one killer of men and women, shouldn't that kind of be the default diet until proven otherwise? And the fact that can also be so effective in preventing, arresting, and reversing other leading killers like high blood pressure, number one killer risk factor in Lithuania, or type 2 diabetes, seems to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming. Let me actually touch on those 2 diseases, though, before we open it up for discussion. We've known since the 1930s that if you take a small group of diabetics, put them on a plant-based diet, and in this case over a period of 5 years, a quarter of them were able to get off their insulin altogether, but plant-based diets tend to be relatively low-calorie diets. And so maybe their diabetes just got better because they lost so much weight. And to tease that out, what you'd have to do is put people on a healthy diet, but force them to eat so much food that they don't lose any weight. Then we can see if there's some kind of unique benefit to plant-based eating beyond just all the easy weight loss. Well, we'd have to wait a few decades, but here it is. Subjects were weighed every day. If they started to lose weight, they may eat more food. In fact, so much more food, some of the participants have problems eating it all. They're like, oh, not another salad. But eventually they adapted. So, zero weight loss despite restricting meat, eggs, dairy, and junk. Okay, so with zero weight loss, was there still any benefit to their diabetes? Well, insulin needs were cut 60% across the board. Half the diabetics ended off all their insulin altogether. Wow, how many years did that take? No, 16 days. This is 16 days later. So we're talking diabetics who've had diabetes for as long as 20 years, injecting 20 units of insulin a day, and then 13 days later on none. Diabetes for 20 years, then off all insulin in less than 2 weeks. Diabetes for 20 years because no one told them about a plant-based diet. For decades, they were just 13 days away at any time. Here's participant number 15, 32 units of insulin on the control diet, then 18 days later on none. Lower blood sugars on 32 units less insulin. That's the power of plants. Now remember, this was with zero weight loss. His body just started working that much better when given the right fuel. And what are the side effects? Oh, how about cholesterol dropping like a rock to under 150 on average? Again, in just a few weeks' time. So, just like telling our patients to make moderate changes in diet will only net us, moderate benefits in terms of cholesterol reduction. How moderate do you want your diabetes? Everything in moderation is kind of a truer statement than many people realize. Asking our patients to make moderate changes in diet can leave our diabetics with moderate blindness, moderate kidney failure, moderate amputation, maybe just a few toes or something. Moderation in all things is not necessarily a good thing. There was this famous study that purported to show, published in a journal called Cell Metabolism, purported to show that diets high in meat, eggs, and dairy could be harmful to the health of smoking, suggesting that those in middle age eating lots of meat, eggs, and dairy 4 times as likely to die from cancer or diabetes. But if you look at the actual study, you'll see that's simply not true. Those eating lots of animal protein in middle age didn't have 4 times the risk of dying from diabetes. They had 73 times the risk of dying from diabetes. Now those that chose moderation, only eating a moderate amount of animal protein, they just had 23 times the risk of death from diabetes. The academic institution where the study was done sent out a press release with a memorable opening line. That chicken wing you're eating could be as deadly as a cigarette. Explaining that, look, quadrupling one's risk of dying from cancer, that's comparable to what one might get smoking cigarettes. So what was the reaction in the nutrition community to this revelation that diets high in meat, eggs, and dairy could be harmful to the health of smoking? Well, one nutrition scientist said it was potentially dangerous to tell people about this study. Why? Because the smoker might think, hey, why bother quitting smoking? My ham and cheese sandwich is just as bad for me. So better not tell anyone about this whole meat and dairy thing. That reminds me of this famous Philip Morris cigarette ad that tried to downplay the risks by saying, hey, you think secondhand smoke is bad, increasing the risk of lung cancer 19%. Well, hey, drinking 1 or 2 glasses of milk every day, maybe 3 times, that's 62% increased risk of lung cancer. Doubling your risk frequently cooking with oil, tripling your risk of heart disease by eating non-vegetarian, multiplying your risk 6-fold if you eat lots of meat and dairy. So, They conclude, let's keep some perspective here. The risks of secondhand smoke may be well below that of other everyday activities, so breathe deep. That's like saying, don't worry about getting stabbed because getting shot is so much worse. How about neither? Two risks don't make a right. Of course, you'll note Philip Morris stopped throwing dairy under the bus once they purchased Kraft Foods. Just saying. All right, let me jump on down to the number one killer risk factor in Lithuania, high blood pressure. Here in the States, 78 million Americans affected. That's about 1 to 3 American adults. And as we get older, our pressures get higher and higher. So that's that by age 60, most of us have high blood pressure. And if you say, wait a second, if most people have hypertension when they get older, maybe it's less a disease than just a natural, inevitable consequence of aging. No, we've known since the 1920s that high blood pressure need not occur. 1,000 people living in rural Kenya had their blood pressures taken. Typical Kenyan diet, something like this, lots of corn and beans, vegetables, fruit, greens. Our pressures go up as we get older. Their pressures go down. And the lower, the better. We now have evidence even people under 120/80 may benefit from blood pressure reduction. So the ideal blood pressure, the no benefit from reducing it further blood pressure, maybe 110/70. 110, is it impossible to get people down to 110/70? It's not just possible, it's normal for those living healthy enough lives. For 2 years, this rural Kenyan hospital, 1,800 patients were admitted. How many cases of high blood pressure did they find? Oh, 0. Wow, they must have low rates of heart disease, right? No, they had no rates of heart disease. Not a single case of atherosclerosis, our number one killer, was found. Rural China, same thing, about 110/70 their entire lives. 70-year-olds, same blood pressure, 16-year-olds. They say, wait a second, African diet, Asian diet, vastly different diets. What they share in common is that they're plant-based day to day with meat only eaten on special occasions. Now, why do we think it's the plant-based nature of their diets that are so protected? Because in the Western world, according to the American Heart Association, the only folks that get it down that low on average are those eating strictly plant-based diets, coming in at about 110/65. Here's the largest study of plant-based eaters to date. This is the Adventist 2 study out of California, looking at 89,000 people, comparing non-vegetarians to so-called semi-vegetarians who eat meat a few times a month, but not every week. Compared to those who eat no meat except fish, compared to those who eat no meat at all, compared to those who eat no meat, eggs, or dairy. And this is an Adventist course. Even the non-vegetarians, they eat a lot of meat compared to the national average, and eat lots of fruits and vegetables. A very healthy cohort of the non-vegetarians, but still, you see this stepwise drop in high blood pressure rates the more and more plant-based one's diet gets. Same thing with diabetes, same thing with obesity. So sure, we can throw the vast majority of our risk out the window by eating strictly plant-based, but it's not all or nothing. It's not black or white. Every movement we can make along this spectrum towards eating healthier can accrue significant benefits. You can show this experimentally. You take vegetarians, you give them meat, and their blood pressures go up. And you take people who already eat meat, you remove meat from their diet, their blood pressures go down within 7 days. And that's after the vast majority had to stop their blood pressure medications or reduce their blood pressure medications. They had to. I mean, you can't, if you treat the cause, I mean, you can't have, normal blood pressure or multiple blood pressure drugs. You drop your pressures too low, it can be dangerous, get dizzy, fall over, hurt yourself. So, lower pressures on fewer drugs. That's the power of plants, and only within 7 days. So, does the American Heart Association recommend a no-meat diet? Well, they recommend this low-meat diet, the so-called DASH diet. So wait a second, when the dash diet was created, were they just not aware of this landmark research done by Harvard's Frank Sachs? No, they were aware. The chair of the design committee that came up with the dash diet was Frank Sachs. See, the dash diet was created with the number one goal of capturing the blood pressure lowering benefits of a more plant-based diet, yet contained enough animal products to make it palatable to the general population. Right? They didn't think the public could handle the truth. Now, you can see what they were thinking here. I mean, just like drugs never work unless you actually take them, diets never work at all unless you actually eat them. So, like, how many people are going to go strictly plant-based? If we soft pedal the message, come up with some kind of compromise diet, maybe overall on a population scale we'll do more good. Okay. But, tell that to the 1,000 American families that lose a loved one to high blood pressure every single day. Maybe it's time to tell the public the truth. And that is that here in the States, most deaths are preventable related to nutrition. This is how the Global Burden of Disease study comes down here in the States. American diet is actually our number one killer, also leading cause of disability as well as mortality, bumping cigarette smoking to number two. Cigarettes only kill about 500,000 Americans a year, whereas our diet kills many thousands more. So if most deaths are preventable related to nutrition, right? If nutrition is the number one cause of death, disability, certainly nutrition is the number one thing taught in medical school, right? It's the number one thing your doctor talks about at Avenue, where he sings or visit, right? I mean, how could there be this disconnect between the science and the practice of medicine? So I'd like to end trying to answer that question with a thought experiment. Imagine yourself a smoker back in the 1950s. Back in the 50s here in the States, the average per capita cigarette consumption, 4,000 cigarettes a year, meaning the average person walking around smoked half pack a day. On average. The media was telling people to smoke. Famous athletes agreed. Even Santa Claus wanted you to smoke. I mean, look, you want to keep fit and stay slender, so make sure to smoke. You need lots of hot dogs to stay trim. You need lots of sugar to stay slim and trim. A lot better than an apple there. I mean, sheesh. But apples do connote goodness and freshness, reads one internal tobacco industry memo, which brings up many possibilities for a youth-oriented. They want to make apple-flavored cigarettes for kids. Shameless. For digestion's sake, you smoke. I mean, no curative power is claimed by Philip Morris, but better be safe than sorry and smoke. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere. No woman ever says, no, they're so round, so firm, so fully packed. After all, John Wayne smoked them until he got lung cancer and died. Back then, even the paleo folks were smoking, and so were the doctors. Now, this is not to say there wasn't controversy within the field of medicine. Sure, some doctors smoked Camels, but others preferred Lucky, so there was a little disagreement. The leader of the U.S. Senate agreed. Who wouldn't want to give their throat a vacation? Not a single case of throat irritation. How could there be when cigarettes are just as pure as the water you drink? Perhaps over in Flint, Michigan. But don't worry, if your throat does get a little irritated, your doctor can just write you a prescription for cigarettes. This is in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So when the AMA is on record saying that smoking on balance is good for you, not just neutral, but good for you, where could you turn back then if you just wanted the facts? What's the new data advanced by science? Well, she was too tired for fun, and then she smoked a camel. Babe Ruth spoke of proof positive medical science, that is, when he still could speak, before he died of lung cancer. Excuse me, throat cancer. If by some miracle back then there was some kind of smokingfacts.org website that could deliver the science directly, bypassing commercially corruptible institutional filters, you would have become aware of studies like this. This is an advanced study out of California, published in 1958, showing that non-smokers at least 90% less lung cancer than smokers. This wasn't the first one. Famed surgeon Michael DeBakey was asked why his studies back in the 30s linking lung cancer and smoking were simply ignored off the face of the earth. He had to remind people what it was like back then. We were a smoking society. I was on airplanes, movies, medical meetings where one heavy haze of smoke. Smoking was, in a word, normal. So, back to our thought experiment. If you're a smoker in the 50s in the know, what do? I mean, with access to the science, you realize that the best available balance of evidence suggests a smoking habit not so good for you. So do you change, or do you wait? If you wait until your doctor tells you between puffs to quit, it could be too late. If you wait until the powers that be officially recognize it, like the Surgeon General did in the subsequent decade, you have cancer by then. It took more than 7,000 studies in the deaths of countless smokers before the first Surgeon General's report against smoking came out here in the States. You think maybe after the first 6,000 studies, it could give people a little heads up or something? Powerful industry. So, I mean, maybe we should have stopped smoking after the 700th study like this. On one hand, as a smoker in the 50s, you had all of society, the government, the medical profession itself telling you to smoke. And on the other hand, all you had was the science. If you're even aware of studies like this. Well, we can fast forward 55 years. You know, there's a new Adventist study in California warning Americans about something else. They may be sticking in their mouths. Of course, not just one study. Take all the studies, put them together, and all-cause mortality, many of our dreaded diseases, is significantly lower among those eating more plant-based. So, instead of someone going along with America's smoking habits back in the 50s, imagine you or someone you know going along with the eating habits of today. What do? I mean, with access to the science, you realize that the best available balance of evidence suggests your eating habits are not so good for you. So do you change, or do you wait? If you wait until your doctor tells you between bites to change, it'll be too late. In fact, even after the Surgeon General came out with a report, the AMA went on record officially refusing to endorse it. Why? Could it have been because they were just handed that $10 million check from the tobacco industry? Maybe. So we can see why the AMA was sucking up to the tobacco industry. But why weren't more individual doctors speaking up? There were a few, ahead of their time, speaking up against industries killing millions. But why not more? Maybe it's because the majority of physicians themselves smoke cigarettes. Just like the majority of physicians today continue to eat foods that are contributing to our epidemics of dietary disease. What was the AMA's rallying cry back then? Everything in moderation. Extensive scientific studies have proven smoking moderation. Oh, that's fine. Sound familiar? The food industry used the same tobacco industry tactic, twisting the science, misinformation. The same scientists for hire paid to downplay the risks of cigarette smoke and toxic chemicals are the same paid for by the National Confectioners Association to downplay the risks of candy, and the same paid for by the meat industry to downplay the risks of meat. Whereas animal foods and processed foods they'd be killing off at least 14 million people every year around the world. So those of you in that room there, part of this evidence-based nutrition revolution, we're talking about 14 million lives in the balance every year. Maybe plant-based eating should be considered kind of the nutritional equivalent of quitting smoking. How long do we have to wait before powers that be say, don't wait for open heart surgery until you start to start eating healthier as well? Until the system changes, we need to take responsibility for our own health, for our patients' health, for our family's health. We can't wait until society catches up to the science again, because it's a matter of life and death. You know, Dr. Kim Williams, immediate past president of the American College of Cardiology, was asked in an interview why he himself follows the same diet he recommends to all his patients, strictly plant-based diet. I don't mind dying, Dr. Williams replied. I just don't want it to be my own fault. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Gregor. That was a pleasant here from the United States, I think so. And we hope to see you next year on the stage live, not online.
I would very much love that.
Okay, we will remember this, okay? So big applause for Mr. Gregor. Any questions?
No. Just take supplement of reformed omega-3s. Hello.
Yes, of course.
I wanted to ask about the preformed omega-3 supplements for vegans. Is it still advisable? Does the science change on that?
Could you repeat the question?
No.
Or if you could repeat it, I can hear you.
Okay. Could you please repeat?
Dr. Gregor, the question was about the omegas. Is supplementation with omega-3 acids is essential for vegans?
Oh, fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking. So, omega-3 fatty acids are essential fatty acids, meaning that we can't make them, we need to get them into our diet. The question, and so the short-chain omega-3s, alpha-linolenic acid is found in walnuts and flax seeds and chia seeds and dark green leafy vegetables and other places. And then our bodies can then elongate those short-chain omega-3 fatty acids into the long-chain fish fats, EPA and DHA, which is important for primarily for brain health. The question is, how efficient is this process, and are we converting enough for optimum health? Because that is an unanswered research question, I encourage people to take long-chain omega-3 fatty acids directly into the diet, so 250 milligrams of EPA and or DHA every day from a pollutant-free source, so algae-based source where one doesn't have to worry about the toxic heavy metals and organic pollutants in fish oil. Until we know more, I think that's a reasonable course. Of course, the most important nutrient vegans need is vitamin B12. Right? There's only two vitamins that are made by plants. One is vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin made by animals such as yourself. When you walk outside, you get enough sufficient sun. The other is vitamin B12. It's not made by plants, not made by animals either, made by little microbes that blanket the earth. And so, we may have been able to get all the B12 we wanted drinking out of a mountain stream or well water or something, but now we chlorinate the water supply to kill off any bacteria. So we don't get a lot of B12 in our water anymore. Don't get a lot of cholera either. That's a good thing that we have a nice sanitary water system. But because of the way, because of the nice sanitary system we live in, we need to get vitamin B12 from somewhere. And so, you know, the gorillas get it from eating bugs, dirt, and feces. I prefer supplements. So 2,500 micrograms of vitamin B12 once a week is all you need. Here in the States, it's less than $5 a year. But critically important for anyone eating a plant-based diet.
Thank you. Any more?
Yep.
Please.
So D vitamin supplementation he mentioned, I've seen some studies where people with chronic diseases take high doses, like 10,000 international units per day, and have seen very positive results. What does Michael think about D vitamin supplementation?
Yes. High doses of vitamin B12. Good. Vitamin D?
D3, yeah.
10,000 units of vitamin D. Some folks need it. Do you find that reality?
Oh, well, I mean, the problem is that the testing is so poor. So I did a video where they sent the same blood sample to like 1,000 labs around the world, and they got dramatically different results. In fact, so much so that some said they had vitamin D toxicity, some showed that they were vitamin D deficient. And so, unfortunately, the labs just aren't very good. So if you get a strange reading, so for example, someone's taking what you'd expect to be enough, like 2,000 international units a day, and they're still really low, one might want to repeat the test to make sure they're really low. There are a number of factors that can impair vitamin D absorption and assimilation. Obesity is a major one. You know, it's fat soluble and kind of get lodged in people's fat stores. So obese persons, older persons, may need higher doses of vitamin D. But I'm not sure exactly. My geography isn't good enough to tell me where in my mind, at what latitude Lithuania is at, but certainly here in the States, where I am in the kind of northeast corner, the sun's rays are at such an angle that, you know, during January, February, no matter how long you sunbathe naked outside, you're not going to make any vitamin D in February. So it's important, particularly during the winter months, in some of the higher latitude countries, to get a supplemental source of vitamin D. And typically, 2,000 international units a day should be good for most people.
Sorry,
but yes, indeed, some people need more. And some people don't need any because they get enough sun.
It was especially connected with chronic diseases. There seems to be some hormonal function that D vitamin has.
Indeed.
The main idea that high doses might be correlated with vitamin D, high doses correlated or non-communicable diseases.
High doses being associated with, negatively or positively associated?
Positive. So with
So
chronic
all the studies, randomized, placebo-controlled studies of vitamin D supplementation for longevity, those were all done with relatively small doses of vitamin D3, not these mega doses, these 50,000 a month D2 doses that are often prescribed here in the States for people with low vitamin D. I think the reason why, and you see that in many of the negative studies showing adverse effects. For example, on gait instability, fracture risk, giving people a massive, dose once a year. I mean, the reason they're doing those kind of dosing is because, typically it's institutionalized elderly, where medication compliance is difficult, and so they hope, well, look, if we can give people an injection once a year and just forget it. But the problem is it's very unphysiological, and so it's not surprising that we would run into problems. Whereas, something like 10,000, if you went outside on a nice sunny day, your body could just pump out 10,000 international units internally. So I'd be surprised if a dose, it sounds like a large dose, but that is a physiological dose, But these 50,000, 100,000, $250,000 doses are unphysiological, and I was not surprised to see some adverse effects associated with them.
Thank you. Other more questions?
Appreciate it. So have a good Wednesday and see you next year here on the stage.
Next year, I'm so jealous that you have Dr. Clapper.
This is why you should come share the stage.
I know. All right. Thank you, everybody.
So we have our last presentation left, and I would like to invite our other great practitioner, Rob Lawson, who has also more than 26 years of practice on the field of lifestyle medicine, who is a fellow of Royal College of General Practitioners, who is the co-founder of British Lifestyle Medicine Association, who is implementing lifestyle medicine principles in his daily practice with patients, and also shares his experience with other practitioners through his core health project. So, let's welcome Dr. Rob Lawson. Your turn.
Thank you. Is this on? Ačiū. Ačiū for inviting me. And thank you for the hospitality that you have offered and this wonderful meeting, and the wonderful speakers that you've had before me. So now you're coming back to earth with a bump. One of the things, I really think you're all heroes for two reasons. One is that you have sat through a whole day listening to things in a language which isn't your mother tongue, which is amazing. And secondly, that you're here because lifestyle medicine is important to you. I think that there's a Brexit problem. You're getting a message to me, aren't you? It's time to finish. Getting an hour into 10 minutes is going to be challenging. So I think you'll find that I'll be moving pretty fast over things that perhaps aren't that important anymore. It's important to say this, though, that at meetings such as this in the United Kingdom, it's important to say what you are, and this is what I am. And the other positive thing is that we register with who pays his doctor, and anybody can look up to see who pays me, but they won't find that there's very much there. I just wanted to talk a little bit about these things, but probably pretty quickly because some of it has been covered already. This is where we're heading. So really, at this point, you can fall asleep because that's all. The only message of this talk really is that's where we're heading. That's where lifestyle medicine is going. But we have to have a way to get there. In order to, the actual title that I was given, I think, was effectiveness of shared medical appointments. That would have taken 2 minutes. So I've actually embellished a bit, and I felt that by understanding a bit about the background, you might find it easier to put it into practice. One of the ways is through behavioral change. Lifestyle medicine principally is behavioral change. And as a consequence of this basic element of lifestyle medicine, we have set up a campaign called #OneChange, and I have a T-shirt to prove it. Okay. And should you wish to get one, get onto our website. And is Alicia here from Poland? Are you here? No, she's not here. Okay. Well, they've done their bit in Poland. So that's the, is Stephen here? Stephen Penman? Yes. Stephen? Yeah, well, where's Stephen in the back? Now, in Australia, they decided that they'd have all their meetings once a week standing. That was their #OneChange. How did you celebrate, Stephen? Okay, so they've been celebrating by standing ever since. That's a bit of a bum's rush, that one. Okay. Excellent. So one little change, and then it becomes a habit, and then you make another change, and it becomes a habit. And that's the essence of lifestyle medicine. Psychology is a surgery of lifestyle medicine, where nutrition and physical activity may be the penicillin. You don't need to see this. That's the definition of it. Yes, we do need it, and we know what Margaret Chan had to say as the WHO director in 2016. Any opinions that I give here are my own. They're not. I'm not speaking on behalf of the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine. But I'm not an author. I'm not a researcher. I'm not famous. I've just been working away as a general practitioner in the United Kingdom. The 17th century English philosopher Francis Bacon is thought to be he was thought to be the founder of modern science, even although he was a philosopher. He said, facts leads to a generalization, which is a theory. One of my countrymen, David Hume, another philosopher, said a theory is invalid if not all the facts have been examined. And the Austrian philosopher Karl Popper said one negative fact is sufficient to disprove a theory. Now, if you substitute fact with evidence, we have a problem. And as a practitioner, I can tell you that we have a problem. That we no longer understand the evidence, we no longer believe some evidence, and we have to be very, very careful, in my view, about generalizing. This is about accepted truth. Again, from Karl Popper, our knowledge can only be finite, while our ignorance must necessarily be infinite. Truth is a daughter of time, not of authority. Truth springs from arguments among friends, and please, can we just argue in a friendly kind of way, especially over nutrition? A wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. That's what happens. That's what happens. I talk about the black swan. You can see all these white swans, and then you see a black one, and you think, hang on a minute, what's the black swan doing amongst the black? I'm not seeing a black swan. It's not there. Just ignore it. It's like the paradox, like the French paradox, and the high saturated fat in front. Oh, well, it doesn't conveniently fit the theory, so it must be a paradox. Same with the Cuban paradox. Well, maybe it's just a black swan, and maybe we should be looking at the black swans to find out, well, what makes them different? In my own family, the black swan was my grandfather, who ate meat 3 times a day all his life because he was a butcher, and so did his children. He was 101 and died very happy. His daughters, one died at 98, one still alive at 97, and the other died at 96. So maybe we should look at the black swans and find out, well, what's different about them. So this is about lifestyle medicine, chronic heart disease. We understand what the diseases are, and we understand risk factors. Obesity, that's slightly controversial as to whether it's a risk factor or a disease. You've got all these things. I'm rushing through now. You've got the upstream causes or determinants, if you like, of chronic disease. And then right at the top, upstream, you've got public health. And so lifestyle medicine is sitting in the middle there. We, as practitioners, are the elastic band holding together conventional medicine and public health. That's where I see it. And I'm paying tribute here to Professor Gary Yeager in Sydney, who is, to me, a mentor. And I think this kind of makes sense to me. And a lot of people who see it think it is makes sense too. If you look as a doctor, you're only looking at one end of the scale, you're kind of missing the point. If you're looking at diabetes, you're thinking, well, obviously you're diabetic because you're overweight, you're obese. Okay, well, why are you obese? Is it because you're overfeeding yourself? Is it because you're inactive? Possibly. So why are you not feeding yourself properly? Why are you inactive? Or maybe you're stressed, you're anxious. Well, why are you stressed and anxious? Because I don't have a job, or I don't have the environment in which I can change what I do. So if you're not dealing with the upstream causes, you're kind of missing the point. And as physicians, we've been missing the point for decades. Chronic disease, where you go with the percentages you want to go with, but between 40 and 90% of chronic disease is preventable. And 40% for cancers, perhaps 90% for cardiovascular disease. Wherever you look, it's different. 80% in our country, general practice, the workload is variable. Again, people can't quite agree on what it is. Some say 50, some 80%, but it's heavy, indeed. This really frightening graph, this one, we've had reference to it, I think, already, but we've crossed the epidemiological, the crossover point happened some while back in the developed world. What is different this time is that chronic disease is on the up, yes, we know that, but so are acute infections. So we are being faced with a double whammy, and how are we going to cope? We're not coping very well at the moment. Something has to change. #OneChange. Very quickly, I don't want to go over this again because people have been mentioning it. You've got the classic inflammation, and you've got the low grade. There's a lovely way to think about it. The chronic inflammation, which Otto Miško very eloquently explained to us back in the early 2000s, it's like an ember burning. It's not the fire of infection, it's the burning embers, just burning away, eating away. The oxidative stress, insulin resistance, metabolic inflammation, oxidized LDL, destroying your glycated endothelium. These are things that are happening all the time. We don't feel it, but they're happening. And so to understand that metabolic inflammation is the key, that we have to reduce our inflammatory load if we're going to make any difference. Now, again, I was going to ask you where you think you see chronic inflammation. I'll just go straight on because the answer is almost everywhere. Okay. Now, these are the determinants of health or disease. Now, there are quite a few of them there, and Gary Egger came up with an acronym, if that's what you can call it. If you look at the first letter of each of those headlines, you come up with nasty malodors. Okay, and that sets the scene. These are very important aspects of lifestyle medicine as I see it. Nutrition, of which is only one. Activity we know about stress. Technopathology, a good example is when this doesn't work, my blood pressure goes right up. The gross examples are wars, people going out killing each other with technology, the smartphones that are sitting in your pockets, and our computers that are leaning over all the time. We get sore shoulders, we get thumb problems, we get Facebook depression. There's lots of things that are happening as a consequence of technology. In other words, we're not really addressing the downside of technology, albeit there's a very strong plus side. In terms of I can ask you, in terms of cause of death, what do you think the third biggest cause of death is in the United States especially?
Prescription drugs.
Iatrogenic disease. Yeah, iatrogenic. Doctors are killing people. And that's not why I went into medicine. It'll be the same in the UK, but no one's keeping tabs. We do know that 10,000 a year die, we think, because of prescription errors. In the UK, we have 1 million people admitted into hospital. So it's a problem. This is a slide which somebody else obviously has shown, but in terms of nutrition, I think let's concentrate on dealing with the ultra-processed stuff. If we get rid of that, then we're kind of dealing with a problem. The States is probably worse than the UK, but not much. Is Bernardo here? Bernardo from Portugal? Yeah. So what's your secret? You're 10.2%. It's wonderful. But not very many processed foods there.
Well, that's great news.
Well, the trajectory in terms of healthy life expectancy is higher in Portugal than it is in the rest of Europe. This I just thought I threw in because I'm in Lithuania and you're a wonderful country. Stress and strain and the death rate of men under 65 per 100,000 in Lithuania. There was a spike. Can anybody, well, you'll know what the spike means. Yeah. So stress does clearly have an impact. If you look at it in the UK, the trajectory is downwards. It flattens out a bit once statins come in. So don't get me started about statins. Now very quickly, components of lifestyle medicine, these are the ones we talked about. Metabolic we talked about it should. The skills or the art of lifestyle medicine, these are the one that I'm using most is de-prescribing at the moment. It's people in our country don't have permission really to de-prescribe. We're still learning how to do it. It's very easy to start drugs, not easy to de-prescribe. Incidentally, we will get to the bit. How many of you in here are sitting the exam tomorrow? Yeah? Okay. So we will get to a bit which is relevant to your exam tomorrow. Okay, so hold on. The tools. These are the tools that you can see that we use. And I use a piece of string because I think that lifestyle medicine is low intervention, low cost way of delivering healthcare. Do you know what the string test is? I don't know what the science is behind it, but essentially you have a piece of string, you stand up against the wall, you make a mark where your height, you get a piece of string and cut it to your height. You put the ends together and put it around your waist. And if they don't meet, you've got a problem, okay? Okay, it doesn't distinguish between those who are fat on the inside and thin on the outside, but it's a pretty simple and easy test. I won't tell you what the other one is about for men standing in the shower, but anyway, you get the message. The procedures. Now this is where we come to the nitty-gritty. In my experience, it was very difficult to intervene in 10 minutes or to have lifestyle-related interventions within 10 minutes of a consultation that we have with our patients when latterly, of course, with the advance of technology, we had computers getting in the way between us and the patient. So the notion of shared medical appointments or group consultations, as we know them in the United Kingdom now, came to us via Ed Nofsinger in the States. I actually met him in Southampton. He was on a world cruise. I think he came off the boat and we had a meeting. His wife kept him straight. But it was a very interesting meeting, and his own personal story is also very interesting. So there are different ways of delivering shared medical appointments. We'll quickly go through this because I know time is passing. In terms of the spread within the United Kingdom, you can see how we're trying to get it to spread. I actually, up there, the very north of Scotland, it's interesting, isn't it, that there's no Northern Ireland. Oops. Oh, wrong way. Technology. There, right at the top, I'll be very careful, is where I share a property with my brother. It's about as far north as you can get, okay, but Shetland isn't on that list, and neither is Northern Ireland. So if there's anyone from Shetland here or from Northern Ireland, I apologise. I know Brexit is upon us, but we didn't really we wanted you to be there, and you're not. In fact, you guys should just cut the thread. Push us out into the Atlantic. Make sure we avoid Ireland on the way, because they won't be happy if we crashed into them. But and don't push too hard, because we'll end up in America and they won't like us over there either. We'll just sit in the mid-Atlantic, just languishing there. But the point is that group consultations we're trying to achieve spread. Our aim is to have it through 1,000 practices and primary care practices and 500 outpatient departments in Scotland, in the United Kingdom within 3 years, and money has been got to enable that to happen. So group consultations, and you're desperate to know what they are. There's an alternative way of consulting with patients. It's still a one-to-one clinical consultation. It's you as a physician are still doing what you were doing before, but you're in the presence of another 10 to 15 patients or whatever. So it's 10 to 15 patients. This is similar condition, yes, but as we've been hearing, if you think upstream a bit, a lot of conditions have a common cause. And so why treat people as conditions? Why don't treat people as people and get anybody with any condition in or no condition to be part of this process of establishing a new way of delivering healthcare. It's managed by a process facilitator. It does really require a bit of training, and it can be somebody in your practice, in your primary care centre or whatever, but they do require a little bit of training to ensure that they can manage the group. It's between 1.5 and 2 hours. Now, I think Ed Nofsinger was very keen in saying that it increased productivity by 300%. If I went to our guys and said, oh, we can get you to work 3 times harder, I don't think they'll be terribly interested. But 1.5 to 2 hours is all you need. For a practitioner, 45 minutes is usually enough. Now, most of us have a 3-hour surgery, so if you compress a 3-hour surgery into, say, 1 hour, then you're creating space to do something else. And it's an important change. As Gary Yeager says, he challenges anybody to find any evidence to suggest that one-to-one consultations are any better than group consultations, when there are several, in his view, several hundred white papers showing the reverse, that group consultations are better than one-to-one. So what they're not standalone patient education programs, they're not self-support or peer support, and yet that actually does happen during the course of it. It's not an expert patient intervention, it's not talking therapy. So the key roles of clinician, facilitator, administrator. The facilitator holding the space, introducing the session. The facilitator introduces everybody to each other. She manages a group, or he manages a group. He gets to know who the troublemakers are quite early on, who are the ones that are shrinking violets, who don't want to say very much, those that are rather verbose. She gets to know, or he gets to know the group as they come in. And it's up to them to keep the dynamic going. It's an awful lot of time. Oh, here we go. Clinician. You are the champion. How many clinicians are there in the room? Oh, about a minority. Well, are you? Nurses. A clinician isn't just a doctor. It's a nurse as well, a healthcare worker. No. Anyway. The role of the clinician is to champion the group consultation. It's including everybody in the team in the primary care centre or the hospital centre to make sure that they are visibly leading and they're good examples. They're rather critical to design the process. It's important that a group consultation model fits what you want to achieve with your particular demographic. And there are different types of group consultations. There's a program, shared medical appointment, which for example is happening in Australia and a few parts around the country, which there's a beginning and end to it. It might be in weight management or diabetes management or whatever. There's a physical shared medical appointment, a group consultation, where rather than just seeing everybody in one room at the same time, you may have to go out of the room with one patient as a clinician, just for a very short space of time before coming back in, and that's a physical SMA. There's the drop-in group medical appointment, which is essentially people ring up and say, I want to see a doctor, when's the next group medical appointment? And so you get this sort of heterogeneous approach to clinical care, which is a wonderful way to work, by the way, but it's slightly too big a step in the United Kingdom for us. So you are the clinical expert in the session, and you have to participate. Before you start, make sure you understand what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, and you're evaluating along the way. We're using the EQ5DL, so it's a validated instrument, but it can be anything that you feel works for you. And it's important to be able to compare your results with other people. The administrator is there to support the whole process along, setting it up on the day and so on. Oh. Now, how do I get this to work? Enter.
As a GP, you're spending a lot of time repeating yourself. You're spending a lot of time wishing that someone could have heard you putting it really well to someone, and then you know that after the third time of saying it, maybe even that day, you've actually not done them a good service because you've not put it very well for them. Because you aren't a machine, you can't just rabbit out the same things all the time. It got me quite excited that I could give a very well thought out way of approaching things for multiple people at once. It's very efficient and allowed us all to share and learn from each other. So what excited me was you could spend a good amount of time with more people more efficiently to give a more gentle, more patient-centered approach, more individualized approach for their care. It's been great. I've loved it. I've just done one today and I feel excited, I feel invigorated, I feel like I've been listened to, which doesn't often happen on a one-to-one basis. So I think I felt a bit trepidatious at the very beginning because it's a bit unknown. Having 10, 15 people in a room is potentially a bit intimidating. But one of the wonderful things about it is actually the pressure is taken off you because you can very much use everyone's knowledge in the room to be their own expert. And as we found, a lot of them have very similar conditions or very similar problems, like pain, diabetes, obesity, knee pain is a classic one. And actually, you see them all prick up their ears and they're thinking, everyone else has got the same problems as me. And it's quite difficult to convince people of that when you're on a one-to-one basis. So I found it very empowering. Like I said, I felt extremely listened to, and it's very engaging. It feels very powerful. So, having done a few different sessions, including the first session as well as some follow-up sessions now, I think the big difference is there are a few. So the first is community engagement. I think the cohort of people are now invested in each other as people, in each other's success, which I think is key, and in their success together, and together they succeed. You can tell that they're feeling like they want to succeed for themselves and for each other. Now, I think that might be a bit of human competitiveness as well, but there is a wonderful and positive general feeling of, well, what's my blood pressure this time? You know, what's my HbA1c? Is my BMI a bit down? What's yours? You know, how are we doing? How can I help that? How can you help that? So that's the first thing. I think there's that buy-in, which is very rare and very difficult to get in one-to-one. The second thing that I think is very, very good is, like I mentioned before, not repeating yourself. If you say something enough times, it sounds like nonsense. And I know that my my joie de vivre about saying these phrases, it goes, you know, and you rabbit them out to the patient and you think, yeah, just eat better. Well, I can't really feel like I can tell you any more than that now. Whereas in the group context, it's great. you have these wonderful interactive conversations with people, with everyone learning and listening about the same thing. They raise things that you wouldn't have thought of, and they teach you things, and you learn all together. I would say time as well is another wonderful thing, just to add on at the end, to have an hour with people or an hour and 20 or something, rather than 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, so that's a living human being who is delivering shared medical appointments or group consultations in the UK. I went through a 10-year period of doing something very similar, and it does bring joy, it does bring laughter, it does bring change, and certainly what, I'm going to really rush now because I think that we've had enough. Why do we need group consultations? Well, it's new, it creates time to care, as you've heard. It does improve outcomes, improve staff well-being, better experience for patients, and workforce development, retention. And certainly in our country, we're having a big problem with workforce retention. Everybody wants to retire, but then I reached the age where I couldn't. Why do we need group consultations? Well, in our country, just in my county, NHS Lothian, if you've got a stomach problem, then you have to wait 114 weeks to see a specialist. Dermatologist is 57 weeks, and so on. So we've got a waiting list problem. In terms of long-term conditions, 3 or more long-term conditions are reported by 2.9 million people. It takes out 50% of GP appointments according to the Office of National Statistics, 64% of outpatient appointments, and 70% of inpatient bed days. The cost of prescribed medication, £17.4 billion. So there's plenty of room for improving things. So how about it? It creates a partnership of care. It increases confidence in individuals to change what they do. It brings fun back to the practice. As you heard, you're not constantly repeating yourself. It delivers immediate benefits. People develop benefits straight away. I was speaking to a lady earlier about an experience in the deprived area of one of the English towns, and 2 people who had attended a shared medical appointment group consultation on chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. They had lung problems. As they were leaving, they found themselves walking in the same direction, so they just started chatting to one another, and they discovered that they had something in common, that they lived very close to one another, and that they had lung problems which they didn't appreciate before. And they also had another thing in common. They had been offered a chance to attend pulmonary rehabilitation classes in their local community centre, and they had not gone. They didn't want to go alone, and they didn't know what they were going to. So they spoke to one another and decided, we'll go together. And they did. That would never have happened as a result of a one-to-one consultation. So there are hidden benefits, if you like, which are difficult to measure. And in terms of the lifestyle agenda, which is what our agenda is, it's a perfect way, it's a perfect procedure to get your lifestyle medicine messages into the whole process. And you don't have to go on repeating yourself. You could just discuss it with one patient, and the others are all listening, and they'll chip in and help the process along. So they are more efficient, no question. I'm not going to play these videos. The reason I skipped past that, I managed after 3 years to get the Royal College of GPs to actually listen to us. It was actually a full session, and to my surprise, there were 3, I didn't realize this until the end, there were 3 journalists at the back, and they came rushing to the front at the end. And before we knew it, every news channel, every newspaper was plastering this thing about shared medical appointments and group consultations, which put the Royal College of General Practitioners on the back foot because they weren't expecting it, and they haven't been hugely supportive. Not that they're against it, but they're not particularly supportive either. So it ended up being on the front page. So in what areas might you use it? Well, you can use it in anything you want to think about, really. If you've got, depending on your demographic, the important thing is sustainability. You've got to have the numbers. So depending on how big your demographic is, you set the times that you have it, how often, and so on and so forth. It has been done in all of these areas, and just yesterday there was a study reported of, I think, 14 papers in 6 different countries showing the benefit of shared medical appointments in delivering care of people suffering painful conditions and also with depression and anxiety. So it happens across various health systems. Across the whole life cycle, it's there and it's helpful. Sorry, I think I might actually show this one, and then that will be pretty much it.
It's helped me a lot because I was going through bereavement. Because I lost my mom, my dad, my brother. I was really struggling with it. So coming to the first meeting here, it helped me a lot because then we talk, we communicate with each other, and everybody have their say. It helped me to putting back my life together then because it was so broken.
It's very different because the doctor, I suppose, don't have enough time to sit with you for 10 or 20 minutes, but when you're in a group, you have more time.
No one goes around saying they're diabetic, so it's hard to actually find people who are in the same boat as you. So you're overcoming one barrier by seeing people who are in the same boat as you. And if you know that someone else has walked that walk, it makes it a lot easier for you.
Being with a group, it's more open now. Then you come in on yourself, you don't know what to say, you don't have questions to ask. They may be thinking, oh well, I've got something, I can't answer it, and somebody else might come with an answer they want to know. If you went to a one-to-one, you're apprehensive all the time and you don't know what to ask and everything else like that. So it's very good, it's a way forward.
I think it's very positive. It really focuses me on eating healthily, and since I've been coming in those weeks, I've lost weight because I don't want to come and say to Dipti, actually you're put on weight. So I try harder.
It's helpful with the people and all different problems we have. I'm not all alone in the world because it's the first time when I found out I'm diabetic. I hide myself. The first time I'm going to meet the people all together, I didn't know it's going to affect me that much, but it's all right. We talk about what we have, the sickness, and it helps because all the people are different.
I think coming to groups such as this will enhance my understanding of it, so I'm better informed. And that can only help me going on if I'm better informed to make the right decisions. So I'm hearing drugs already, I'm hearing the associated conditions that might be around it.
Yeah, it's getting better. It's getting better because no one...
You get the picture. The evaluation, as you expect, is very good. I'd like to take a picture because I'm really going to move on. 90% of patients prefer group consultations versus normal care. You're keeping these poor people back. Yeah. Next steps. Just so that you know, I'll put them all out if you want to take a picture. It's important to get the buy-in. If you don't get buy-in from the team, it's not going to work. Make sure that you've got the space. Now, it's not just the time space, it's the infrastructure. Whereas in America, where clearly it's been going for a long time, you guys have plenty of space. In other parts of the world, I've seen SMAs happening in just a tiny little room with people sitting like this next to one another, not worried about invading their space. It can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to have space. The design program is very important. The lead-in is very important. Booking, inviting people. Who invites them is important. If, as a doctor, you invite the patient, you'll get 90% uptake. If you're a nurse, you'll get 50%. If you're a receptionist, you'll get 10%. So it is worth going through this in a lot of detail, and that's why we have a training program to make sure that it does get up and running, because you don't want it to fail. So, you can wake up now. It's all been a nightmare. Okay? And you can get away, no, for you, and it means you can get away only half an hour late. Thank you very much. Please get up and walk away. You know, if you yes, I'm happy to answer.
When you invite people as a physician, would it be even more effective if you would write a prescription or like a prescription, a recommendation for group 10?
Interesting question. I think that's up to the doctor. I don't like the term prescription myself. You know, I don't want to be the one that's prescribing anything to anybody. This is a joint decision here. You know, if you can prescribe it for yourself, is this a good idea for you? Why didn't you prescribe it for yourself? And you want to stick it on the fridge and just to remind you to turn up. But yes, I think having the capacity to get people into the system is important. And we stress this is not in addition to what you do. This is instead of, it's an alternative. We're not creating more work, we're trying to reduce the workload and increase efficiency and effectiveness. And there's no doubt it does, but the profession is still kind of mentally blocked. We've got to move on. And so we've...
There's a follow-up question. How many times do you meet? In what frequency? What time intervals? Are there some guidelines for us?
Just asking about time intervals. Again, it's a chameleon. It's organic. It grows from what your needs are. So if you get a very homogeneous group like people who had a heart attack in the last 3 months, you know, you're not going to get very many visits out of that, of those people, as much as that you'll do a lot of good. But if you go for people with metabolic disease, suddenly the doors open and you can just call people in every week, not the same person, just have them available every week, and people can drop into them. They don't need to come in and come out in a given time frame. They know they're happening and they can drop in. Others, the program shared medical appointment has a beginning and an end, and so they come for maybe 6 sessions once a month or whatever. It's entirely dependent on how you see your practice needing to develop.
Yeah.
Sorry, back.
Is it always the same group of people? Like the core is the same group of people? Are they varied?
Well, I consider it important not to set out to do that, because it's having a range of, even with a single condition, to have people at different stages is actually helpful. And having new people coming in and others leaving is actually helps the group dynamic. But it is possible to set up a group and run with it. The danger there is it becomes a support group, and that's not what it's about. It's about it's dealing with the clinical problem of the individual. That's what it's about. It's still the one-to-one clinical consultation, it just happens to be in the presence of others. So it sits between, on a spectrum, the one-to-one at one end and the group education at the other. It's in the middle. Sorry.
I wanted to ask about how you deal with legal issues of confidentiality because you're sharing personal.
Yeah. Sorry, we skipped over that. A confidentiality waiver is signed by every patient, and they know that they have to stick by it. It comes up every time. The confidentiality issue, doctors are terrified, and yet as a doctor in a small town, I can be standing in a supermarket queue and I can hear what people are talking about, and I'm not worried about the whole supermarket hearing about it, so why should they worry about a closed group? You know, so I think that the confidentiality waiver is the way we get around that. We tell people that in the United States, which is a litigious place, apparently, there's not been a single legal case. So if Americans are happy, we're happy.
More questions? So, thank you very much, Rob. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for your for good fitness and for listening this all long day of the presentations. And You are welcome to attend the second day of our conference tomorrow, and the second day of conference is taking place at the university, at the address is Tulžies gatvė 18, and you know, our Lithuanian colleagues know this place very well, and for our foreign guests will assist to find the venue of the conference. So thank you very much, and till tomorrow.
Sorry.